My mother always said that blood was thicker than water. She said it at every family dinner, every holiday gathering, every time I questioned one of her decisions. She would look me dead in the eyes and repeat those words like they were some sacred commandment handed down from heaven itself. Blood is thicker than water. Family comes first. We protect our own. I believed her. I was young and naive and I wanted nothing more than to make her proud. I wanted to be the daughter she could brag about at her garden club meetings, the one she could show off to her wealthy friends with the perfect husband and the perfect career and the perfect life. But here is the thing about my mother that I did not understand until much later. When she talked about blood being thicker than water, she was not talking about love. She was talking about currency. She was talking about power. She was talking about the carefully constructed empire of social standing and financial security that our family had spent generations building. The day it all fell apart started like any other Tuesday. I was 29 years old and I had just finished the most important presentation of my career. I was an architectural designer, a job that I loved with every fiber of my being, and I had been working for months on a proposal for a sustainable housing project that would revolutionize low-income neighborhoods in our city. It was my passion project, the thing I stayed up until 3 in the morning working on, the thing I poured my heart and soul into. My mentor Philip always said that I had a gift for seeing what others could not, for understanding how spaces could shape lives in ways that were invisible to the naked eye. He told me I was a visionary. I believed him because I had to believe something. The presentation went perfectly. The investors were impressed, my colleagues were supportive, and my husband Mark was waiting for me at the restaurant across the street with a bottle of champagne. Mark was a real estate developer, tall and handsome with a smile that could charm anyone, and he was the man I had chosen to spend my life with. He was supportive in ways that my family never was. He celebrated my successes and helped me when I failed. He told me that my family was wrong about me, that I was brilliant and capable and worthy of all the love in the world. I met him at a conference 3 years before and we fell in love over blueprints and coffee and late-night conversations about the future of urban design. He proposed to me on the roof of a building he was developing and I said yes without a second thought. My mother nearly had a stroke when she found out. She called me on the phone and demanded to know who he was, where he came from, what his family did for a living. She wanted to know his net worth, his social connections, his standing in the community. She did not ask if he was kind or if he made me happy or if we shared the same dreams. She asked about his portfolio and his pedigree and his potential. When I told her that Mark was a successful developer with a bright future, she seemed somewhat satisfied. Then I told her his race. I told her that the man I loved was black. The silence on the other end of the line lasted so long that I thought the call had dropped. When she finally spoke, her voice was cold and sharp like a blade. She said she needed time to process. She said the family needed to discuss things. She said I had made a mistake and I needed to reconsider. But I did not reconsider. I married Mark in a small ceremony with only a handful of friends present. My mother refused to attend. My sister Claire, who had always been the golden child, the one who followed every rule and married exactly the right man from exactly the right family, sent me a letter telling me I was embarrassing everyone. She said I was selfish and thoughtless and that I had no idea what I was doing. She said I was throwing away everything our family had built for some fleeting romance that would never last. I cried reading that letter. I cried for days. But Mark held me and told me that we would build our own family, our own legacy, our own world. He told me that we did not need them. He told me that love was enough. For 3 years, I believed him. For 3 years, I trusted him with every secret and every fear and every hope I had. For 3 years, he was my partner and my best friend and the only person in the world who made me feel like I was enough exactly as I was. He never once mentioned the land. He never once asked about my grandmother's property, that odd little lot in the middle of the city that she left me in her will. It was a strange piece of land, small and oddly shaped, surrounded by parking lots and abandoned warehouses. I had no idea what to do with it. I thought about selling it a dozen times but something always held me back. My grandmother told me before she died that the land was special, that it had a secret history that I would one day understand. She said it was the only thing she could give me that my mother could not take away. I stored the deed in a safety deposit box and tried not to think about it. Then Mark came to me with his big project. He was excited, more excited than I had ever seen him. He had been working on a development plan for years, a massive mixed-use complex that would transform the entire downtown area. It was going to be his masterpiece, the thing that would cement his legacy as one of the greatest developers in the city. He had everything in place, the investors, the permits, the architectural plans. There was just one problem. The entire project hinged on a single piece of property that he could not acquire. It was a small lot right in the middle of his proposed development, owned by someone who refused to sell. When he described the location, my blood ran cold. It was my grandmother's land. The same piece of land that had been sitting in my safety deposit box for years, the same piece of land that my mother had tried to get me to sign over to her a dozen times, the same piece of land that I had almost forgotten about. Mark looked at me with those earnest eyes and asked if I would help him. He said he needed the land to make his dream a reality. He said he would pay me for it, of course, a fair market price that would set us up for life. He said we could use the money to buy a house and start a family and finally have everything we had ever wanted. He said he loved me and that this was just another way we could build our future together. I trusted him completely. I signed the papers without even reading the fine print. I was so overwhelmed by his excitement and his love that I did not stop to question why he had never mentioned the land before. I did not stop to wonder why he had been so supportive of my career, so attentive to my needs, so perfectly wonderful in every way. I was blind and I was stupid and I paid for it with everything I had. 3 months after I signed the papers, Mark sat me down in our living room. He had a folder in his hand and a look on his face that I had never seen before. It was not anger or sadness or regret. It was a cold, calculated calm. He opened the folder and slid a document across the coffee table. It was a divorce petition. My heart stopped. I could not breathe. I looked at him and waited for the punchline, waited for him to laugh and tell me it was a joke, waited for him to pull me into his arms and say he was sorry for scaring me. But he did not laugh. He just sat there with that cold expression and told me that he was filing for divorce. He told me that our marriage was a strategic alliance, nothing more. He told me that my family had approached him before the wedding and offered him a deal. If he married me and convinced me to sign over the land, they would guarantee him the connections and capital he needed to build his empire. I felt like the floor had opened up beneath me. I asked him if he ever loved me. He said that was not the point. He said that love was a luxury that people like us could not afford. He said that I was naive and emotional and that I had no idea how the real world worked. He said that my mother was right about me, that I was a liability and a disappointment and that I had been holding him back. He said that marrying me was the price he paid for access to my family's network, for the land that would make his fortune, for the future he had been building since he was a boy. He said that he was done paying that price. He said that I was no longer useful to him. He took the champagne glasses from our engagement and smashed them against the wall. I remember the sound of the glass shattering. I remember the way the bubbles dripped down the wallpaper like tears. I remember thinking that this could not be real, that I must be dreaming, that any moment now I would wake up in his arms and he would tell me it was all a nightmare. But I did not wake up. I sat there on the couch while my husband told me that our entire marriage was a lie. He told me that my family had orchestrated the whole thing. He told me that my mother had dangled me like bait and he had taken the hook because the reward was worth the cost. He said I was a means to an end, a stepping stone on his path to greatness. He said that I was nothing without the land and the connections and the money. He said that my career was a joke, that my designs were mediocre, that I was only ever successful because of the family name I was born into. Then he stood up and walked out the door. He did not look back. He did not apologize. He just left me there in the ruins of our life together, surrounded by the shattered glass of our engagement and the ghost of every promise he ever made. I sat on that couch for hours. I did not cry. I did not scream. I just sat there staring at the wall, trying to understand how everything I believed in could be so completely wrong. I thought about the nights he held me when I cried about my mother. I thought about the mornings he made me coffee and told me I was brilliant. I thought about the way he looked at me when he said I do. Every single moment was a lie. Every single word was a manipulation. Every single gesture was calculated. The love I felt was real, but the love I received was nothing more than a performance. The next day, I called my mother. I do not know why. Maybe some part of me hoped she would comfort me, that she would see the pain in my eyes and finally show me the love I had been craving my entire life. I told her what Mark had done. I told her about the land and the divorce and the way he had shattered our life together. I expected her to be angry on my behalf. I expected her to be shocked and horrified and ready to defend her daughter. Instead, she was silent for a long moment. Then she said, "Well, I suppose you learned your lesson." She said that I had made my bed and now I had to lie in it. She said that I had chosen a man over my family and now I was paying the price. She said that if I had listened to her from the beginning, none of this would have happened. She said that I had brought this on myself. I was so stunned that I could not speak. I asked her if she knew about the arrangement with Mark. She did not deny it. She said that sometimes sacrifices had to be made for the greater good. She said that my grandmother's land was always supposed to go to the family, that I was never meant to keep it for myself. She said that my marriage to Mark was a way to secure the land and the alliances that would keep the family prosperous for generations. She said that my feelings did not matter as much as the bottom line. She said that I was selfish and childish and that I had never understood what it meant to be part of something bigger than myself. She said that I had chosen a side and it was not her side. She said that I was no longer part of the family. My sister Claire called me the next day. She was calmer than my mother but no less cruel. She told me that I was an embarrassment. She told me that everyone in their social circle was laughing at me. She told me that Mark had already been seen at events with a new woman, someone from a more prominent family who could actually help him with his career. She said that I had been a fool to ever think that a man like that could love someone like me. She said that I was plain and ordinary and that I had no real talents. She said that my designs were derivative and boring. She said that the only reason I ever had a job was because my mother pulled strings. She said that without my family name, I was nothing. Those words cut deeper than anything Mark had said. I had spent my entire life trying to prove myself to my sister, trying to earn her approval, trying to be good enough for her standards. And now she was telling me that I had never been good enough. She was telling me that all of my achievements were a lie. She was telling me that I was nothing. I wanted to scream. I wanted to fight back. I wanted to tell her that I had a secret project that was going to change the world, that my mentor Philip believed in me, that I had a future that did not depend on any of them. But I was too broken to speak. I just hung up the phone and stared at the wall and felt my entire identity dissolve into nothing. I lost my job a week later. There was a leak. Someone sent an internal memo to the entire company that made me look like I had been stealing credit for other people's work. I knew it was Mark. He had access to everything. He knew all my passwords, all my files, all my secrets. He had been planning this for months. He wanted to destroy me completely, to make sure I could never recover, to erase every trace of my existence from the professional world. I tried to fight it. I went to my bosses and explained the situation. I showed them proof of my work, proof of my contributions, proof that I was innocent. They did not care. They told me that the damage was done, that my reputation was tarnished, that they could not afford to be associated with someone who was at the center of so much drama. They fired me without severance. They told me to pack my things and leave. I remember walking out of that building for the last time. I remember the way the security guard looked at me with pity. I remember the way my colleagues avoided eye contact. I remember thinking that my life was over. I was divorced, disowned, and unemployed. I had no money, no prospects, no future. I had been stripped of everything I had ever worked for. I was standing on the street corner with a cardboard box full of my personal belongings and no idea where to go. I called my mother one more time. I was desperate. I was broken. I told her that I needed help. I told her that I had nowhere else to turn. She said that I had made my choices and now I had to live with them. She said that she could not help me. She said that I was dead to her. She hung up the phone and I never spoke to her again. I spent the next 2 weeks in a cheap motel on the bad side of town. I had enough money saved to last a month, maybe 2 if I was careful. I spent most of my time lying in bed staring at the ceiling, trying to understand how everything had gone so wrong. I replayed every conversation, every decision, every moment of my life trying to find the point where I could have changed things. I thought about my grandmother and her strange little piece of land. I thought about the secret history she mentioned, the one I never got to understand. I thought about her face and her voice and the way she always believed in me. She was the only one who ever saw me for who I really was. She was the only one who thought I was special. And now she was gone and I was alone and everything she had given me was gone too. The phone rang on the 15th day. I almost did not answer it. I was so deep in my own despair that I had stopped caring about anything. But something made me pick up the phone. It was my old mentor Philip. I had not spoken to him in years. He had retired from teaching and moved to the coast. I did not know why he was calling me. I did not know how he had found my number. But when I heard his voice, something shifted in my chest. He said he had heard about what happened. He said he was sorry. He said he had been following my career and he knew I was capable of better. He said he was calling to offer me a job. I almost laughed. I told him I was ruined, that my reputation was destroyed, that no one would ever hire me again. He laughed at that. He said he was not offering me a job. He was calling to remind me of my real value. Then he told me about the Phantom Nexus. He told me that the AI I had coded years ago was still in use by a major design firm. He told me that the licensing fees had been accruing in a trust for years. He told me that I was rich. He told me that I was free. He told me that I had a future. I dropped the phone. I sat on the floor of that motel room and I started to laugh. I laughed until I cried. I cried until I could not breathe. And then I looked in the mirror and for the first time in weeks, I saw a face that was not a victim. I saw a woman who had been wronged. I saw a woman who had been beaten down. I saw a woman who had been stripped of everything she owned. But I also saw a woman who had nothing left to lose. And that was the most dangerous woman of all. I called Philip back and told him I was ready. I told him I was ready to rebuild. I told him I was ready to fight. I told him I was ready to show every single person who had betrayed me exactly what I was made of. He said he knew I would say that. He said he had been waiting for this moment. He said he had a plan. He said he was going to help me take back everything I had lost. And then he said something that changed everything. He said the land I signed over to Mark was only part of the puzzle. He said my grandmother had left me more than just a piece of property. He said there was a will that no one knew about, a document that had been hidden for years, a secret that would change everything. He said it was time to come home. It was time to rebuild. It was time for revenge. The motel room had yellow wallpaper with brown stains in the corners and a ceiling fan that wobbled like it was about to fall on my head at any moment. I lay on the thin mattress with my phone pressed to my ear and listened to Philip's voice telling me that I was not the failure everyone thought I was. I listened to him tell me that the Phantom Nexus was still generating revenue and that the money had been sitting in a trust account collecting interest for years. I listened to him tell me that I was a millionaire many times over and that I had never known it. The words did not make sense at first. They bounced around my brain like loose change in a dryer and I could not catch them. I kept waiting for the punchline. I kept waiting for someone to tell me it was a joke. But Philip was not a man who joked about things like money. He was a serious man with a serious face and a serious voice, and when he told me I was wealthy I knew he meant it. But I did not feel wealthy. I felt hollow and broken and so profoundly tired that I could barely lift my head from the pillow. The weeks of humiliation and loss had carved out something inside me that I did not know could be carved out. I had lost my husband to a lie. I had lost my family to a business deal. I had lost my career to a smear campaign. I had lost my identity to people who saw me as nothing more than a tool to be used and discarded. The money Philip was talking about should have made me happy. It should have made me feel vindicated and powerful and ready to take on the world. Instead, it made me feel more alone than ever. What good was money when everyone I loved had betrayed me? What good was wealth when I had no one to share it with? What good was freedom when I had no idea what to do with it? I stayed in that motel room for another week after Philip's call. I did not check out. I did not pack my bags. I just lay there day after day staring at the ceiling fan and wondering if I had the strength to get up. The money sat in the bank account like a stranger in my house. I could not touch it. I could not spend it. I could not even think about it without feeling a wave of nausea wash over me. Every dollar was a reminder of everything I had lost. Every cent was a monument to the years I had wasted trusting people who never deserved my trust. I thought about Mark and the way he had looked at me when he handed me the divorce papers. I thought about my mother and the cold precision in her voice when she told me I was dead to her. I thought about Claire and the cruel laughter in her words when she told me I was nothing. I replayed every moment in my mind until I could recite their dialogue in my sleep. The money was freedom, but freedom felt like a cage. I had spent my entire life trying to please people who would never be pleased. I had worked myself to exhaustion trying to earn love that was never going to come. I had given everything I had to a marriage that was built on nothing but calculation and greed. And now I was supposed to celebrate? Now I was supposed to dance on the graves of my relationships and pretend that I had one? I could not do it. I could not muster the strength to be angry. I could not summon the will to be vengeful. All I could feel was the weight of my own stupidity pressing down on my chest like a brick. I had been so blind. I had been so naive. I had been so desperately hungry for approval that I had walked willingly into a trap that anyone else would have seen from a mile away. Philip called me every day. He did not push. He did not pressure. He just called and talked to me about neutral things, about the weather and the news and the projects he was working on. He told me stories about his own failures, about the times he had been betrayed and humiliated and left for dead. He told me about the partner who stole his designs and the investor who ran off with his money and the wife who left him for a younger man with a bigger boat. He told me that pain was not something to be ashamed of. He told me that failure was not the end of the story. He told me that the only people who never got hurt were the ones who never tried. He told me that I was allowed to grieve. He told me that I was allowed to break down. He told me that I was allowed to be weak as long as I promised to get back up. His words did not heal me. Nothing could heal me. But they gave me something to hold on to in the darkness. They gave me a rope I could climb when the walls started closing in. I started getting out of bed. I started eating again. I started taking showers and washing my clothes and doing all the small things that seemed so impossible just days before. I did not feel better. I did not feel hopeful. I did not feel anything except a dull ache that seemed to have taken up permanent residence in my chest. But I was moving. I was functioning. I was existing. And sometimes that is all you can do when the world has been ripped out from under your feet. I went to the bank on the 23rd day. I walked into the branch with my identification and a letter from Philip, and I asked to see the balance of my trust account. The teller looked at me like I was a ghost. She could not believe that the woman standing in front of her in a cheap sweater and worn-out jeans was the same woman who owned that account. She called her manager and they pulled me into a private office and asked me to verify my identity a dozen different ways. I showed them my passport and my birth certificate and my social security card and the deed to my grandmother's land. They nodded and made copies and told me to wait. I sat in that sterile office for nearly an hour before a woman came in with a folder and a smile that did not quite reach her eyes. She told me I had enough money to buy a small country. She told me I had enough money to retire and never work again. She told me I had enough money to do whatever I wanted for the rest of my life. I stared at the numbers on the page and felt absolutely nothing. The zeros stretched across the paper like an endless road to nowhere. I could buy houses and cars and boats and planes. I could travel the world and eat at the finest restaurants and stay in the most luxurious hotels. I could do everything I had ever dreamed of and more. But I did not want any of it. I wanted my grandmother. I wanted to sit in her kitchen and drink her tea and listen to her stories about the old days. I wanted to hear her laugh. I wanted to feel her arms around me. I wanted to believe again that there was goodness in the world. My grandmother was the only person who ever made me feel truly seen. She was not like my mother or my sister. She did not care about money or status or what the neighbors thought. She cared about art and beauty and the quiet dignity of a well-lived life. She taught me how to draw when I was 5 years old. She sat me down at her kitchen table with a box of colored pencils and a blank piece of paper and told me to draw whatever was in my heart. I drew a house with a purple roof and yellow windows and a garden full of flowers that did not exist in nature. She looked at my drawing and told me it was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. She told me I was an artist. She told me I had a gift. She told me I could do anything I wanted as long as I never stopped believing in myself. She was the one who taught me about the land. She took me to that odd little lot in the middle of the city when I was 12 years old. It was nothing but weeds and broken glass and rusty fences. I asked her why she owned such an ugly piece of property. She laughed and said that ugliness was just beauty waiting to be discovered. She said the lot was special because it had a history. She said it used to be a garden. She said it used to be a place where people came together to celebrate life and love and hope. She said the city had grown up around it and forgotten it was there. She said it was like me. Small and overlooked and full of potential that no one else could see. She said she was leaving it to me because she knew I would understand what it really was. I did not understand then. I was too young and too naive and too distracted by the cruelty of my mother and the coldness of my sister. I did not appreciate the gift she had given me. I did not see the value in that abandoned little lot. I thought it was a burden. I thought it was a strange inheritance that I would never know what to do with. But now I understood. Now I saw what she had been trying to tell me all along. The land was not about money. It was about legacy. It was about memory. It was about the things that really mattered in a world that had forgotten how to care. My grandmother gave me the land because she trusted me to protect it. She gave me the land because she knew I would not sell it for profit or trade it for power. She gave me the land because she loved me. I walked out of that bank with a balance that could change the world, and I felt like I was carrying a stone in my heart. The money was not a victory. It was a reminder of everything I had lost. It was a reminder of the grandmother I would never see again and the marriage that was never real and the family that had thrown me away like garbage. I went back to my motel room and sat on the bed and looked at the wobbling ceiling fan and wondered what my grandmother would want me to do. She would not want me to wallow. She would not want me to give up. She would not want me to let my mother and Mark and Claire destroy everything I had worked for. She would want me to fight. She would want me to rise. She would want me to prove that love was stronger than hate and hope was stronger than despair. But I was still too broken to fight. I was still too shattered to rise. I was still drowning in the wreckage of my old life and I could not see the shore. I spent the next 2 weeks in that motel room doing nothing but thinking. I thought about Mark and the way he had used me. I thought about my mother and the way she had sacrificed me for her business deal. I thought about Claire and the way she had laughed at my pain. I thought about all the years I had wasted trying to earn their approval. I thought about all the nights I had cried myself to sleep because I was not good enough for them. I thought about all the lies I had told myself to survive. I thought about all the compromises I had made to keep the peace. I thought about all the dreams I had buried because someone told me they were stupid. And then I thought about my grandmother again. I thought about her hands and her voice and the way she looked at me like I was the most precious thing in the world. I thought about the garden she used to tend behind her house, the one with the roses and the lavender and the old oak tree where we would sit and talk for hours. I thought about the drawings I had made as a child and the way she had framed every single one and hung them on her wall. I thought about the promise she made me when I was crying about my mother. She said that some people are born into families and some people have to build their own. She said that family was not about blood. It was about love. It was about loyalty. It was about the people who showed up for you when everything fell apart. She said that I was her family and she would always be mine. I started to get angry. The anger came slowly at first, like a sunrise that takes its time breaking through the clouds. It was small and fragile and I was almost afraid to let it grow. But grow it did. It spread through my chest like wildfire and burned away the numbness that had been holding me captive. I thought about Mark and his cold eyes and his calculated words and I felt the heat rise in my blood. I thought about my mother and her dismissive tone and her willingness to sacrifice me for a business deal and I felt the fire burn brighter. I thought about Claire and her mocking laughter and her cruel satisfaction in my pain and I felt the flames consume everything. The anger was not pretty. It was not noble. It was raw and ugly and desperate and it was exactly what I needed to survive. I called Philip the next morning. I told him I was ready. I told him I was not going to let them win. I told him I was going to take back everything they had stolen from me and more. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said he had been waiting for this phone call for 9 years. He said he knew I had it in me. He said he had a plan. He said he was going to help me tear down everything my mother and Mark had built and build something better in its place. He said we were going to do it together. He said we were going to show them all that they had made a terrible mistake. He said we were going to make them pay. I got up off that bed and I packed my bags. I left the motel room with nothing but a cheap suitcase and a burning rage and a secret bank account that could buy anything I needed. I did not know where I was going or what I was going to do, but I knew I was not going to stop until every single person who had hurt me understood exactly what they had done. I was done being a victim. I was done being a pawn. I was done being invisible. I was Amelia Thompson and I was about to become the most dangerous person they had ever met. My grandmother was gone but her spirit was with me. She was whispering in my ear that I was stronger than I knew. She was telling me that I was an architect in every sense of the word. She was telling me that it was time to build something new. I flew to the coast on a red-eye flight that left at midnight and arrived at dawn. Philip met me at the airport with a car and a smile and a folder full of documents that would change my life. He did not hug me. He was never a hugger. But he looked at me with something in his eyes that I had not seen in a long time. It was respect. He saw a woman who had been beaten down and had clawed her way back up. He saw a woman who was ready to fight. He saw the student he had always believed in, the one who had more talent in her little finger than most architects had in their entire bodies. He handed me the folder and told me to read it on the way to his house. I opened it and started reading and I did not stop until we pulled into his driveway. The documents were about the Phantom Nexus. Philip had been the one who facilitated the original sale years ago when I was just a graduate student with a big idea and no money to develop it. He had found a buyer who was willing to take a chance on my work, a firm that specialized in urban planning and sustainable design. The buyer paid a modest fee for the rights to my AI and I signed the contract without really understanding what I was giving away. I was young and desperate for validation and I did not think the AI would ever amount to anything. I thought it was just a school project. I thought it was just another idea that would never see the light of day. I was wrong. The AI turned out to be revolutionary. It became the backbone of a multi-billion-dollar firm. And I had signed away my rights for pennies. But Philip was smart. He was always smart. He had structured the contract with a licensing clause that ensured I would receive royalties if the AI was ever commercialized. The firm had fought it at first. They had tried to bury the clause in legal jargon and hope I would never notice. But Philip noticed. Philip always noticed. He had been tracking the firm's success for years, waiting for the moment when the royalties would become significant enough to matter. That moment had arrived. The firm had just signed a massive contract with a foreign government to redesign an entire city using my AI. The licensing fees were astronomical. And they were all mine. I had enough money to do whatever I wanted. But money was not what I wanted. I wanted revenge. Philip poured me a cup of coffee and sat me down at his kitchen table. He told me he had been planning this moment for years. He told me he had been waiting for me to wake up and realize my own power. He told me that my family and my ex-husband had made a grave mistake by underestimating me. He told me that they had no idea what I was capable of. He told me that I was not just an architect. I was an architect with the most advanced urban planning AI in the world at my disposal. I was an architect who could see the future of cities and reshape them to my will. I was an architect who could destroy my enemies not with violence but with brilliance. And that was so much more satisfying than anything else. I asked him what he had in mind. He smiled the smile of a man who had been waiting for this question for a very long time. He told me the first thing I needed to do was stop thinking like a victim and start thinking like a queen. He told me that Mark's development was the center of his universe. He had poured everything into it. His money, his reputation, his future. The land he stole from me was the linchpin of the entire project. Without it, his development was worthless. But with it, he was set for life. Philip told me that the land was the key to everything. And he told me that I still had the power to control it. I was confused. I had signed the land over to Mark. I had signed the papers and handed him the deed and watched him walk away with everything I owned. How could I possibly get it back? Philip leaned forward and explained that the land was not the only piece of the puzzle. My grandmother had been smarter than anyone gave her credit for. She had not just left me the land. She had left me the rights to everything around it. She had purchased options on the surrounding properties decades ago when the area was nothing but abandoned factories and empty lots. She had paid pennies for options that were now worth millions. And those options had never been exercised. They were still sitting in a trust, waiting for someone to claim them. That someone was me. I had no idea my grandmother was that shrewd. I had always seen her as a gentle soul, a woman who loved flowers and art and quiet conversations. I never imagined she was a real estate genius. But Philip told me that she had been one of the most successful property investors in the city before she retired. She had built a fortune from nothing and she had hidden it all in plain sight. She left me the land because she trusted me to see its value. She left me the options because she knew I would need them one day. She had been preparing for this moment my entire life. She had been setting the stage for my revenge before I even knew I would need it. I felt tears stream down my face. I had spent so many years feeling abandoned and unloved. I had spent so many years believing that my grandmother was the only person who ever cared about me. And now I knew that she had been watching over me all along. She had been protecting me from beyond the grave. She had been building an empire that I could use to destroy the people who had hurt me. She had given me the weapons I needed to fight back. She had given me the tools I needed to win. I wiped my tears and looked at Philip and told him I was ready to start. He opened a second folder and showed me the first step of the plan. Step 1 was to buy up all the surrounding properties. Mark thought he only needed my grandmother's land to complete his development. He was wrong. He needed the entire block. The surrounding properties were essential for access roads and parking structures and the kind of infrastructure that made a development viable. Without them, his project was dead in the water. He had been trying to acquire them for years but the owners had refused to sell. They were holding out for higher prices and he could not afford to wait. He was over-leveraged and desperate. And now I was going to swoop in and buy every single one of those properties right out from under his nose. I hired a team of real estate agents and lawyers and began the process of acquiring the surrounding land. I did it quietly. I did it through shell companies and blind trusts and every legal trick that Philip taught me. I used my Phantom Nexus money to make offers that the owners could not refuse. I paid top dollar for properties that were worth a fraction of what I was offering. I did it because I wanted to win. I did it because I wanted to watch Mark's face when he realized what I had done. I did it because my grandmother had taught me that sometimes you have to spend money to make a point. And I had plenty of money to spend. The acquisitions took months. I moved back to the city and rented a small apartment under a fake name. I did not want anyone to know I was back. I did not want my mother or my sister or Mark to have any idea what I was planning. I walked the streets like a ghost, invisible and forgotten, while I built my empire in the shadows. I bought the old warehouse on the corner. I bought the parking lot behind the abandoned theater. I bought the empty storefronts and the crumbling office buildings and the weed-choked lots that had been sitting empty for decades. I bought everything within a 2-block radius of my grandmother's land. I paid cash. I did not ask questions. I did not leave a trail. And then I waited. I waited for Mark to make his move. I knew he would eventually. He was too ambitious and too arrogant to let his project die. He had invested too much money and too much pride to walk away. He would come looking for the land he needed and he would find nothing but my name on every single deed. The moment he discovered what I had done would be the moment I struck. I wanted to see his face. I wanted to see the realization dawn on him that he had been outmaneuvered by the woman he had discarded. I wanted to see the panic in his eyes when he understood that his entire future was in my hands. But Mark was not the only one I was planning to destroy. My mother and my sister had played their parts too. They had conspired with him. They had sacrificed me for a business deal. They had watched me suffer and laughed at my pain. They had thrown me away like garbage and never looked back. I was going to make them pay for every single moment of cruelty. I was going to take everything they had built and tear it down around their ears. I was going to show them that they had made a terrible mistake. I was going to show them that I was not the weak and helpless daughter they thought I was. I was an architect. And I was going to redesign their entire world. I started with my sister Claire. She was the golden child, the one who had always been favored. She had married into a wealthy family and spent her days attending charity events and hosting dinner parties and pretending to be something she was not. Her fiancé, the man she was engaged to when everything fell apart, was from a powerful family that had connections to my mother's business partners. He was the key to everything. If I could destroy him, I could destroy Claire. And I had the perfect weapon. The Phantom Nexus was more than just an urban planning tool. It was a data analysis machine. It could process vast amounts of information and find patterns that no human could see. I fed it everything I could find about Claire's fiancé. His business records, his financial history, his personal connections. The AI found something that I had never expected. It found a pattern of fraud. Claire's fiancé had been running a Ponzi scheme. He had been taking money from investors and using it to fund his lavish lifestyle. He had been lying to everyone, including my sister. He was not the wealthy prince she thought he was. He was a con artist. He was a criminal. I did not go to the police. I did not expose him immediately. I waited. I watched. I gathered evidence until I had enough to destroy him completely. And then I leaked it anonymously to the business press. The story broke on a Monday morning. By Tuesday, his investors were in a panic. By Wednesday, the authorities were investigating. By Thursday, he was arrested. By Friday, Claire's engagement was over. She called me in tears, begging for my help. She did not know I was the one who had ruined her. She thought I was still the pathetic sister she had always looked down on. She thought I was still the victim she had mocked and ridiculed. She had no idea that I was the architect of her destruction. I listened to her cry on the phone and I felt nothing. No pity. No guilt. No satisfaction. Just a cold emptiness that had replaced all the love I once had for her. She had thrown me away without a second thought. She had laughed at my pain and celebrated my downfall. She had called me nothing and meant it. Now she was nothing. Now she was the one who had been humiliated. Now she was the one who had been discarded. And I could not bring myself to care. My mother was next. She had built her identity around her position in the historical society. She was the president, the queen of a small but powerful circle of wealthy women who controlled the cultural life of the city. She wielded her influence like a weapon. She decided who was in and who was out. She decided what was celebrated and what was forgotten. She decided what was worthy of preservation and what was destined for the trash heap. She had made my life a living hell because I did not fit into her perfect little world. And now I was going to take that world away from her. I used the phantom nexus again. I fed it everything I could find about my mother's tenure at the Historical Society. It found a pattern of abuse. My mother had been selling access to the Society's archives to private collectors. She had been taking bribes in exchange for access to rare documents and artifacts. She had been using her position to enrich herself at the expense of the institution she was supposed to protect. It was not illegal in the strictest sense, but it was deeply unethical. And it was exactly the kind of scandal that would destroy her reputation. I posed as a journalist and contacted a reporter who specialized in cultural institutions. I gave her the evidence and let her do the rest. The story came out on a Sunday. By Monday, my mother was facing calls for her resignation. By Tuesday, she had been forced to step down. By Wednesday, she was a pariah in the circles that had once celebrated her. She called me in rage, screaming accusations that I did not bother to deny. She knew I was behind it. She knew I had orchestrated her downfall. She threatened to sue me. She threatened to destroy me. I listened to her scream and I felt nothing. I had spent my entire life craving her approval. I had spent my entire life trying to earn her love. I had sacrificed my own happiness to make her proud. And she had repaid me by selling me out to a man who only wanted my land. She had treated me like a commodity, a bargaining chip, a piece of property to be traded for profit. She had never loved me. She had never even seen me. She had only seen what I could do for her. And now she was paying the price. Mark was the last one. I had been saving him for the end because I wanted to savor it. He was the one who had hurt me the most. He was the one who had pretended to love me. He was the one who had taken everything I had and thrown me away. He was the one who had destroyed my career and my reputation and my sense of self-worth. He was the one who had made me feel like I was nothing. And I was going to make him feel the same way. I waited until his development was on the verge of collapse. He had spent every penny he had on the project. He had borrowed money from everyone he knew. He had staked his entire future on that single piece of land. And now he had nothing. The surrounding properties were all owned by me. He could not build without them. He could not sell without them. He could not do anything except watch his dreams crumble into dust. And then I made my move. I offered to sell him the properties at a price that was so high it was insulting. I offered to let him buy back the land he had stolen from me for 10 times what it was worth. I offered to let him save his project if he was willing to grovel. He called me in desperation, begging for mercy. He told me he was sorry. He told me he had made a mistake. He told me he still loved me. I listened to him lie and I laughed. I laughed until I could not breathe. And then I told him that he was never going to see that land again. I told him that I was going to build a garden on it, a beautiful public garden that anyone could visit. I told him that his development was dead. I told him that I had won. The night of the gala arrived like a storm I had been watching on the horizon for months. I stood in front of the full-length mirror in my penthouse apartment and studied the woman staring back at me. She was not the same woman who had crawled into that motel room 9 years ago. She was not the same woman who had signed away her grandmother's land for love. She was not the same woman who had begged her mother for help and been told she was dead to the family. This woman was steel and silk and something far more dangerous than either. This woman had survived. This woman had rebuilt. This woman had won. The penthouse was the first thing I bought when I returned to the city. It sat at the top of the tallest building in the downtown core, a glass and steel monument to everything I had achieved. The views stretched for miles in every direction, and I could see the entire city spread out beneath me like a living blueprint. I could see the empty lot where my grandmother's land used to be. I could see the surrounding properties I had bought up one by one. I could see the hole where Mark's development was supposed to go. I could see the future I was building with my own two hands. It was not the future anyone had planned for me. It was better. I slipped into the dress I had chosen for the evening. It was black and simple and elegant, and it cost more than most people made in a year. I did not wear it to impress anyone. I wore it because I could. I wore it because I had earned the right to wear whatever I wanted without asking permission. I wore it because my grandmother would have loved it. She always told me that clothes were armor, that the way you dressed was the first statement you made to the world. And I had a statement to make tonight. I was going to walk into that gala and show everyone exactly who I was. I was going to walk into that gala and watch the people who had betrayed me realize that they had made a terrible mistake. The gala was being held at the Phoenix, the building I had designed with the help of the Phantom Nexus. It was the tallest structure in the city, a twisting tower of glass and steel that seemed to reach for the sky like a living thing. I had poured everything I had into that building. Every hope, every dream, every ounce of rage that had been building inside me for 9 years. It was my masterpiece. It was my revenge made manifest. And tonight it was hosting the most important event of the year. The entire city's elite would be there. My mother would be there. My sister would be there. Mark would be there. They would all be there, and they would all see what I had built. And they would all know that I had done it without them. Philip met me at the entrance of the building. He was wearing a tuxedo that was slightly too old-fashioned and a smile that was slightly too knowing. He had been with me every step of the way. He had been my mentor and my ally and my friend when I had no one else. He had believed in me when everyone else had abandoned me. He had given me the tools I needed to rebuild my life. He had watched me rise from the ashes, and he had never once asked for anything in return. He was the closest thing to family I had left. And tonight he was going to watch me finish what we had started. We walked into the grand ballroom together. The room was filled with crystal chandeliers and white tablecloths, and the kind of people who had never known a day of real struggle in their lives. They were the people who had made my life a living hell. They were the people who had laughed at my pain and celebrated my downfall. They were the people who had thrown me away like garbage and never looked back. They were all there, drinking champagne and eating caviar and pretending to be something they were not. And they had no idea that I was about to destroy them. I saw my mother first. She was standing near the bar with a group of women who used to be her friends. She looked older than I remembered. Her hair was grayer and her face was more lined, and there was a desperate edge to her laughter that had never been there before. She had lost everything. Her position at the Historical Society. Her social standing. Her reputation. She was a ghost in the world she had once ruled. And she knew that I was the one who had done it to her. She looked at me across the room and her eyes narrowed with hatred. I smiled at her and raised my glass in a toast. She turned away without acknowledging me. She could not even look at me. She could not bear to see what I had become. My sister Claire was standing on the other side of the room. She was clinging to the arm of a man I did not recognize, some new conquest she had found to replace the one I had destroyed. She looked thinner than I remembered, and there were dark circles under her eyes that makeup could not hide. She had been through a lot since I ruined her engagement. She had been publicly humiliated and privately devastated, and she had never quite recovered. She saw me watching her and her face twisted with anger. She wanted to come over and scream at me. She wanted to blame me for everything that had happened to her. But she knew that she could not. She knew that I had won. She knew that she was nothing compared to what I had become. I did not see Mark anywhere. I looked around the room but he was not there. I started to wonder if he had decided not to come. I started to wonder if he was too ashamed to show his face. And then I saw him. He was standing in the corner near the windows, alone and miserable, nursing a drink that he did not seem to want to drink. He looked older than I remembered. His hair was thinning and his face was lined, and there was a desperate hunger in his eyes that had never been there before. He had lost everything. His business. His reputation. His future. He was a ghost in the world he had once ruled. And he knew that I was the one who had done it to him. I walked across the room to him. I did not hurry. I wanted to savor every step. I wanted to feel the weight of the moment pressing down on me. I wanted to remember this for the rest of my life. He saw me coming and he tried to smile. It was a pathetic attempt at charm, a ghost of the smile that had once convinced me to marry him. He said my name and I almost laughed. He had no right to say my name. He had no right to speak to me at all. But I let him speak because I wanted to hear what he had to say. I wanted to hear him grovel. He told me I looked beautiful. He told me he had always thought I was beautiful. He told me he had made a terrible mistake. He told me he was sorry. He told me he still loved me. He told me he wanted another chance. He told me he would do anything to get me back. He told me that losing me was the worst thing that had ever happened to him. I listened to him lie and I felt nothing. No anger. No pity. No satisfaction. Just the cold emptiness that had replaced all the love I once had for him. He was pathetic. He was desperate. He was everything I had never seen because I was too blinded by my own need for approval. I asked him how his development was going. He flinched like I had slapped him. He said it was not going well. He said he had hit some unexpected obstacles. He said he was having trouble acquiring the land he needed. He said he did not understand why all the owners had suddenly decided to sell to the same mysterious buyer. He said he was stuck. He said he did not know what to do. I smiled at him and told him I knew exactly who that buyer was. I told him it was me. I told him I had bought every single property surrounding his development. I told him I had done it months ago. I told him I had been planning this for years. The color drained from his face. He looked like he was going to be sick. He asked me why I would do something like that. He asked me what I was trying to prove. He asked me if I was trying to destroy him. I looked at him and I felt the weight of everything he had done to me pressing down on my chest. I felt the years of lies and manipulation and betrayal. I felt the pain of watching my career crumble and my reputation burn. I felt the loneliness of being abandoned by everyone I loved. I felt the desperation of that motel room and the yellow wallpaper and the wobbling ceiling fan. And I let all of that rage flow through me like electricity. I told him that he had destroyed me. I told him that he had used me and discarded me and made me feel like I was nothing. I told him that he had taken everything I had and thrown it away. I told him that he had broken my heart and my spirit and my will to live. I told him that he had laughed at my pain and celebrated my downfall. I told him that he had taken my grandmother's land and used it to build his empire. I told him that he had stolen my future and sold it for profit. I told him that he was a monster. And then I told him that I was going to make him pay for every single moment of suffering he had caused me. He tried to apologize. He said he did not mean to hurt me. He said he was just trying to get ahead. He said he was just trying to build a better life for himself. He said he never thought it would go this far. He said he never thought I would find out. I laughed at that. I laughed until I could not breathe. I asked him how he could possibly think that I would not find out. I asked him if he really believed I was that stupid. I asked him if he really believed I would just sit back and let him destroy me. He had no answer. He just stood there with his mouth open and his eyes wide and his dreams crumbling around his ears. I told him the truth about the land. I told him that my grandmother had left me more than just that one lot. I told him about the options she had purchased decades ago, the ones that gave me the right to buy up the entire neighborhood. I told him that she had been planning for this moment her entire life. I told him that she had known he would try to take advantage of me. I told him that she had set a trap for him and he had walked right into it. I told him that everything he had done to me had been anticipated and prepared for. I told him that he had never been in control. I told him that I had been in control all along. He looked like he was going to cry. He looked like a child who had just realized that the world was not going to give him what he wanted. He looked like a man who had lost everything and had no idea how to get it back. I should have felt sorry for him. I should have felt some shred of pity for the man I had once loved. But I felt nothing. He was not the man I had married. He was never the man I had married. The man I married was a fiction, a character he had created to manipulate me. The real Mark was the one standing in front of me now. The real Mark was pathetic and desperate and utterly broken. I walked away from him without looking back. I did not need to see his face. I did not need to hear his words. I had said everything I needed to say. I had done everything I needed to do. The revenge was complete. The debt was paid. The scales were balanced. I walked back to Philip and told him it was over. He nodded and said he had been watching. He said he was proud of me. He said he knew I had it in me. He said he had never doubted me for a second. He said my grandmother would have been proud. I felt tears prick at my eyes, but I did not let them fall. I had cried enough over these people. I was done crying. I was done feeling sorry for myself. I was done being a victim. But the night was not over yet. My mother and my sister were still in the room. They were still nursing their wounds and plotting their revenge. I knew they would come to me eventually. They could not help themselves. They had to confront me. They had to try to regain some shred of their former power. They had to make me pay for what I had done to them. And I was ready for them. I was ready for anything they could throw at me. I had been preparing for this moment for 9 years. I had been rehearsing my lines and sharpening my weapons. I was not going to let them win. I was not going to let them take anything else from me. I saw them approaching together. My mother and my sister, walking across the room like they owned it. They were trying to look confident. They were trying to look powerful. But I could see the cracks in their armor. I could see the desperation behind their eyes. They had lost everything and they knew it. They were coming to me not to fight but to beg. They were coming to me because they had nowhere else to turn. They were coming to me because I was the only person who could save them. And I had no intention of saving them. My mother spoke first. She said she wanted to talk. She said she wanted to make things right. She said she had made a mistake and she was sorry. She said she loved me and she wanted me back in the family. She said she would do anything to repair our relationship. She said she would give me anything I wanted. I listened to her lies and I felt the cold emptiness that had replaced all the love I once had for her. I asked her why I should believe her. I asked her why I should trust her after everything she had done to me. I asked her why she had waited until she needed something from me to come crawling back. She did not have an answer. She just stood there with her mouth open and her eyes wide and her world crumbling around her. My sister stepped forward next. She tried a different approach. She tried to appeal to my sense of family. She said we were sisters. She said we had to stick together. She said we had to support each other. She said we had to forget the past and move forward. I laughed at that. I asked her where that sentiment was when she was laughing at my pain. I asked her where that sentiment was when she was telling me I was nothing. I asked her where that sentiment was when she was helping our mother destroy my life. They had no answer. They just stood there with their mouths open and their eyes wide and their dreams crumbling around their ears. I looked at them and I felt nothing. No anger. No pity. No satisfaction. Just the cold emptiness that had replaced all the love I once had for them. They were pathetic. they were desperate. They were everything I had never seen because I was too blinded by my own need for approval. And now they were paying the price for their cruelty. I told them that they had made their choices. I told them that they had chosen money over love. I told them that they had chosen business over family. I told them that they had chosen greed over loyalty. I told them that they had thrown me away like garbage and never looked back. I told them that they had no right to ask me for anything. I told them that they had no right to be in my presence. I told them to leave and never come back. I told them that they were dead to me. They left without another word. They walked away with their heads down and their shoulders slumped and their worlds in ruins. I watched them go and I felt nothing. No anger. No pity. No satisfaction. Just the cold emptiness that had replaced all the love I once had for them. It was done. It was finally done. The revenge was complete. The debt was paid. The scales were balanced. I had won. The gala wound down around me like a clock winding to its final hour. The champagne ran dry and the music faded and the guests began to trickle out into the night. They had seen something tonight. They had seen a woman rise from the ashes and claim her rightful place. They had seen a family destroyed by its own greed and a man brought to his knees by his own arrogance. They had seen the power of a woman who refused to stay down. They had seen me. And they would not forget what they had witnessed. I stood by the window and watched the city lights flicker below me. The Phoenix was the tallest building in the city and from up here I could see everything. I could see the empty lot where my grandmother's land used to be. I could see the surrounding properties I had bought up one by one. I could see the hole where Mark's development was supposed to go. I could see the future I was building with my own two hands. It was not the future anyone had planned for me. It was better. It was mine. And no one could take it away from me. Philip came to stand beside me. He did not say anything at first. He just stood there and looked out at the city with me. He had been with me through everything. He had been my mentor and my ally and my friend when I had no one else. He had believed in me when everyone else had abandoned me. He had given me the tools I needed to rebuild my life. He had watched me rise from the ashes and he had never once asked for anything in return. He was the closest thing to family I had left. And tonight he had watched me finish what we had started. He told me he was proud of me. He told me he had never doubted me for a second. He told me my grandmother would have been proud too. I felt tears prick at my eyes but I did not let them fall. I had cried enough over these people. I was done crying. I was done feeling sorry for myself. I was done being a victim. I was an architect. I was a builder. I was a woman who had taken everything the world had thrown at her and built something beautiful out of the wreckage. I was not going to let anyone make me feel small ever again. Philip left me alone with my thoughts. He knew I needed a moment to process everything that had happened. He knew I needed to feel the weight of the victory settling on my shoulders. He knew I needed to let it all sink in. I stood at the window and watched the city and I thought about the journey that had brought me here. I thought about the girl who had trusted the wrong people and paid the price. I thought about the woman who had crawled into that motel room and wanted to die. I thought about the fighter who had clawed her way back from the brink. I thought about the queen who was standing here now, victorious and unbroken. I was all of them. I was every version of myself that had ever existed. And I was finally whole. I thought about my grandmother. I thought about her hands and her voice and the way she looked at me like I was the most precious thing in the world. I thought about the garden she used to tend behind her house, the one with the roses and the lavender and the old oak tree where we would sit and talk for hours. I thought about the drawings I had made as a child and the way she had framed every single one and hung them on her wall. I thought about the promise she made me when I was crying about my mother. She said that some people are born into families and some people have to build their own. She said that family was not about blood. It was about love. It was about loyalty. It was about the people who showed up for you when everything fell apart. She said that I was her family and she would always be mine. She was right. I had built my own family. Philip was my family. The team of lawyers and agents and architects who had helped me build the Phoenix were my family. The people who believed in me when I did not believe in myself were my family. I did not need my mother or my sister or Mark. I did not need people who only loved me when I was useful to them. I did not need people who saw me as a stepping stone to their own success. I had built a life that was worth living and I had done it without any of them. That was the greatest revenge of all. I walked through the empty ballroom on my way out. The staff was cleaning up the tables and stacking the chairs and sweeping the floors. They smiled at me as I passed. They knew who I was. They knew what I had done. They knew that I was the woman who had designed this building and funded this event and destroyed the people who had wronged me. They looked at me with respect and admiration and a little bit of fear. That was fine by me. I had earned every bit of it. I had earned the right to be feared. I had earned the right to be respected. I had earned the right to walk through this world with my head held high. I stepped out onto the street and breathed in the night air. It was cool and clean and full of possibility. The city was quiet at this hour, the streets empty and the buildings dark. I looked up at the Phoenix and I saw my reflection in the glass. I saw a woman who had been through hell and come out the other side. I saw a woman who had been broken and rebuilt herself. I saw a woman who had every reason to give up and chose to fight instead. I saw myself. And I liked what I saw. The next few weeks were quiet. I did not hear from my mother or my sister or Mark. They had slunk back into the shadows where they belonged. They had nothing left to say to me and I had nothing left to say to them. The revenge was complete. The debt was paid. The scales were balanced. There was nothing more to do except move forward with my life. And that is exactly what I did. I threw myself into my work. I designed more buildings. I won more awards. I became the most sought-after architect in the city. People came to me with their dreams and I turned them into reality. I built schools and hospitals and community centers. I built homes for people who had never had a home. I built spaces that brought people together and made them feel seen. I used my grandmother's land to build a public garden, just like I had promised Mark. It was beautiful and peaceful and full of flowers that reminded me of her. I dedicated it to her memory. I put a plaque at the entrance that said her name and the words she had always said to me. Ugliness is just beauty waiting to be discovered. I hoped she could see it from wherever she was. I started to feel something I had not felt in a long time. I started to feel happy. Not the desperate, grasping happiness of someone trying to prove themselves. Not the fragile happiness of someone waiting for the other shoe to drop. Real happiness. The kind that comes from knowing you are exactly where you are supposed to be. The kind that comes from building a life that is truly your own. The kind that comes from loving yourself enough to let go of the people who never loved you back. I was happy. I was finally happy. And I did not need anyone to validate it. I met Leo 6 months after the gala. He was a structural engineer who had been hired to work on one of my projects. He was brilliant and kind and he had a smile that made my heart skip a beat. He did not know my history. He did not know about the betrayal or the revenge or the years of suffering. He just knew me as the architect who designed beautiful buildings and cared deeply about the people who used them. He saw me for who I was in the present moment. He did not carry the baggage of my past. He did not look at me like I was a victim or a survivor or a queen. He looked at me like I was just a woman. And that was exactly what I needed. We started spending time together outside of work. We went for coffee and walks in the garden and dinners at small restaurants that no one had ever heard of. He told me about his family and his childhood and the dreams he had for the future. I told him about my grandmother and my work and my love for design. I did not tell him about the betrayal. I did not tell him about the revenge. I wanted to keep that part of myself separate from the life I was building with him. I wanted to be new. I wanted to be unburdened. I wanted to be the woman I had always wanted to become. It was not easy. There were nights when the memories came back to haunt me. There were nights when I woke up in a cold sweat with the sound of Mark's voice in my ears. There were nights when I saw my mother's face and felt the old ache of rejection. There were nights when I wondered if I would ever be able to trust anyone again. But Leo was patient. He gave me space when I needed it, and he held me close when I needed that instead. He did not push. He did not pry. He just loved me in the quiet way that real love demands. And eventually I started to believe that I deserved it. We have been together for 2 years now. We live in a house I designed myself, a small and beautiful place filled with light and laughter. We have a garden full of flowers that remind me of my grandmother. We have a life that is peaceful and full of joy. I still work. I still design buildings and win awards and change the world in my own small way. But I am no longer driven by rage. I am driven by love. I am driven by a desire to build something beautiful that will outlast me. I am driven by the knowledge that I have overcome everything the world threw at me and I am still standing. I think about the woman I used to be. I think about the girl who trusted the wrong people and paid the price. I think about the woman who crawled into that motel room and wanted to die. I think about the fighter who clawed her way back from the brink. I think about the queen who stood in the ballroom and destroyed her enemies. They are all part of me. They are all pieces of the woman I have become. I am not ashamed of any of them. They made me who I am today. They gave me the strength to build a life that is truly my own. I still think about my mother sometimes. I do not forgive her. I do not think I ever will. But I have let go of the anger. I have let go of the need for her approval. I have let go of the hope that she will ever change. She is who she is. She made her choices. She will have to live with the consequences. I am no longer responsible for her happiness or her pain. I am only responsible for my own. And I choose to be happy. I think about Mark sometimes too. I do not hate him anymore. I have let go of the rage. I have let go of the need for revenge. I got my revenge. I got everything I wanted. And now I am done. He is a ghost in my past, a lesson I learned the hard way. I do not wish him well, but I do not wish him ill either. I simply do not care. He is nothing to me. He has no power over me. He never will again. I think about Claire sometimes. I do not feel sorry for her. She made her choices. She chose to side with my mother against me. She chose to mock my pain and celebrate my downfall. She chose to be cruel when she could have been kind. She will have to live with that. I do not wish her well and I do not wish her ill. I simply do not care. She is nothing to me. She has no power over me. She never will again. I think about my grandmother more than anyone. I think about her hands and her voice and the way she looked at me like I was the most precious thing in the world. I think about the garden she used to tend behind her house. I think about the drawings I made as a child. I think about the promise she made me. Some people are born into families and some people have to build their own. I built my own. I built it with love and loyalty and the people who showed up for me when everything fell apart. And I am proud of what I built. I am standing on the roof of the Phoenix. It is sunset and the city is spread out beneath me like a living blueprint. I can see the garden where my grandmother's land used to be. I can see the homes I have built and the lives I have touched. I can see the future stretching out before me like an endless horizon. I am exactly where I am supposed to be. I am exactly who I am supposed to be. I am an architect. I am a builder. I am a woman who took everything the world threw at her and built something beautiful out of the wreckage. I turn away from the railing and I see Leo coming toward me with a smile on his face. He is carrying a glass of wine in each hand and he looks at me like I am the most beautiful thing he has ever seen. I smile back at him. This is my life. This is my love. This is my victory. No one can take it away from me. No one can destroy it. No one can touch it because I built it with my own 2 hands. It is the blueprint of my heart and I am proud of every single line. If you have made it this far, I want you to know something. I want you to know that no matter what you have been through, no matter who has betrayed you, no matter how dark the road ahead seems, there is always a way out. There is always a way to rebuild. There is always a way to rise from the ashes and claim your rightful place in this world. It will not be easy. It will not be quick. It will require everything you have and more. But it is possible. I am proof of that. I am proof that you can survive anything and come out the other side stronger and wiser and more powerful than you ever imagined. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being here with me through every chapter. Thank you for witnessing my journey from rock bottom to the top of the world. If my story has touched you in any way, please hit that subscribe button. Join this community of people who refuse to stay down. Join this community of fighters and survivors and builders. Join this community of people who know that the best revenge is a life well lived. I will see you in the next chapter. I will see you in the next story. I will see you on the other side of whatever battle you are fighting. Because we are all in this together. And we are all going to win. I take Leo's hand and we walk to the edge of the roof. The city is glowing beneath us and the stars are coming out above us and the world is full of possibility. I look at the man I love and I know that I have finally found my home. It is not a place. It is not a building. It is a person. It is a feeling. It is the knowledge that I am exactly where I am supposed to be. I squeeze his hand and he squeezes mine back. I am Amelia. I am an architect. I am a survivor. I am a woman who built her own family and her own future. And I would not change a single thing about the journey that brought me here.